Welcome aboard the SENCo's Compass. I'm Julia Clouter, your Chief Engineer. Warp Tech by name, Warp Speed by nature. And with me at the helm is our fearless captain.
Alex Boldly Hoff, reporting for duty. We're navigating policy, practice and possibility in SEN today. And on today's voyage, it's really special because it's beautiful and sunny outside. And we'll be exploring chapter 1 from the book. And we're going to use that as our focus for this episode.
Yes, this podcast accompanies our superb new book, which is entitled The SENCo's Compass, Navigating Policy, Practice and Possibility.
Available from Taylor Francis Routledge from autumn 2026.
This episode is sponsored by Rum and Coke.
Stop making things up, Warp Tech. We don't actually have a sponsor at the moment.
But we might have one soon. If we try really hard at it, I'm sure someone who could potentially sponsor us, do you think? Crayola.
Yeah. Let's get on with the show. The audience can pretend that they're on the boat.
Aye, aye, Captain.
Hoff, hoff, and away.
I can do hoff and away. Just
watch
me.
Hoff and away.
Oh, this compass keeps spinning in circles. How are you supposed to find true north when the needle won't settle?
It's funny you should say that. Did you know that in this week's school Newsweek, it talks about teacher burnout and supporting teachers' workload and wellbeing?
I didn't know that, but what I do know is that there is an increasing amount of SENCos who are feeling completely exhausted and who definitely need our support. And, we'd really love to know what you think the challenges are that you are facing, and we'd love you to be part of our community. So we've got a little gig going on the Facebook webpage. It's called Ask the SENCo. Alex has been in the background and she's been answering questions and supporting people with conversations there. So it's a really good place where you can join the conversation and even let us know what you might like to be hearing about on the next episode of the SENCo's Compass podcast.
Yeah, please look out for the posts on Ask the SENCo page on Facebook and engage with any of the questions that we pose on there. Please pop your topics for discussion and I can use those and filter them for the questions for our upcoming guests.
That sounds fantastic. Well, this week's theme links really beautifully because we have a super special guest and, I can't see them at the moment, so presumably they're on board somewhere. I think they must be downstairs in the captain's quarters.
Oh, sorry, Captain Alex. I'll get some WD-40 on that door hinge before the next episode.
First guest on the podcast series is Jack Walker. And he's got a history of supporting lots of vulnerable learners over the years in different roles and positions across many different settings, going from Birmingham all the way to Dubai. And when he was in Birmingham, he worked in a large inner city secondary school as a languages specialist, teaching 3 different languages to a really diverse population of pupils with English as an additional language alongside SEN pupils. He then moved to London to take on the role of head of languages, again at another large inner city secondary school. And then in his most recent journey, he's head of personal development at a Universal American School in Dubai. And he's also just completed his international SENCo qualification. So somebody that's really skilled and also really passionate about supporting vulnerable learners across the world. So welcome, Jack. How do you like my quarters?
It's all a bit messy here. I think you need to tidy the maps up.
I think I'll move a new cabinet in here for you, Captain, so that you can have a clearer deck. I wouldn't like our guests feeling uncomfortable in your untidy quarters. That's just not on. We'll do better.
Thank you,
Jack. I promise you for next time.
Thank you, Chief Tech. Well, we've invited you here today to help us explore your knowledge and your skills and understanding about teacher workload I know you're heavily involved in the unions, Workload and Wellbeing. It's something you're passionate about, but you're also somebody that wants to get it right for the pupils. So thank you for coming in. First of all, I'd just like to ask you to talk about your first role in teaching. So when you were an NQT, as they were called then, not ECTs, and how you found teaching a vast array of different abilities in a mixed ability languages classroom.
So back when I started my NQT year, I started working in one of the biggest schools in England, one of the biggest schools definitely in Birmingham. And being a young teacher, it was quite overwhelming. I don't think I'd ever been in a place other than a concert hall that had so many people, and people from all walks of life, every background, from multiple countries. I think they had around 60 languages within their population being spoken. The staff were very, very multinational, and that was something that I really enjoyed. I stayed at that school for 5 years, working in the languages department, teaching mainly German and Spanish to GCSE. And generally, it was a really enjoyable time. I learned to be creative in how I would teach something as boring as the past tense, for example. You got to use lots of games. But also, I was aware that I was teaching some students that would get it like that, others that would get it over a long period of time. I could talk to my head of department about ideas, about how to do things, but if they didn't know the child themselves, their advice was somewhat limited. So that meant that I had to go away and spend an awful lot of time as an NQT making resources with specific people in mind. And looking back, it was good because it taught me how to differentiate to a high level, but it took away an awful lot of my life.
It's not sustainable. Trying to be creative and trying to think about ways to enable the learners to feel confident and empowered to understand the difficulties of the language you're trying to teach. And I think the biggest thing for secondary teachers and primary teachers is we've got this curriculum, we've got a time period in which we need to teach this because they've got an end of term assessment that equates to what we've taught them. And we're not in control of creating our own end of term assessments because that's not the way this school works, and everybody's got to do the same content. But like you said, some of our SEN learners or EAL learners would need that content taught to them over a longer period of time. So I think the time frames was always so pressured that you had limited time to think, can I be more creative before we move on to something more challenging? And I think that's where teachers don't feel like they have the authority or the autonomy to go ahead and make those decisions by themselves, specifically if you're an NQT. You said your head of department was quite understanding in terms of allowing you to be quite creative. Was there anybody else that you felt that you could reach out to in the school to support you with some of that learning?
Initially, I had my weekly or bi-weekly meetings with the NQT coordinator. The advice was always somewhat limited when it came to SEN because that person wasn't a specialist either. It was always nice to be able to share the experience, but in the moment, the advice wasn't always as good as it could have been. I made the effort because I mainly taught lower ability groups at the time to seek out and go and observe students in other lessons. There was a collection of students that always had the same teachers, and I remember going to see their English teacher, watching how she taught them English, observing quietly from the back, and that was very interesting. It was a good insight, and I learnt very quickly it's all about routines. Get the routines in place and everything else slots in over time. And then more the school year goes on, you naturally get to know people more. So I got to know the SENCo. At times I thought maybe I was a little bit annoying because I had too many questions to ask, but I would always say to anyone that joins, there's no such thing as too many questions. Ask away. Another person who I worked quite closely with was the head of the EL department. She was great, had a wealth of knowledge, and that was just a very interesting insight to how inner city schools with such wide cultural backgrounds tried to impart English. I feel like the national curriculum doesn't marry up with schools like that because we're pushing them to learn what we consider a second language. But for many of them, English is their second or third or fourth or fifth. So, teaching them German bit of a waste of time.
Was there anything specifically that you felt was a success after you tried it?
When it comes to the lower ability students, and to me now looking back, it just seems so simple and so obvious, and I think every classroom everywhere in the world should have them, is the writing slope. It made kids who had completely illegible writing, made it so that I could read their work and I could congratulate them, motivate them. I went on a trip this year with my current school to a school in Tanzania that had nothing like the facilities that we had. I can't even describe to you. It was like going back to Victorian school classrooms. Every single child had the most incredible handwriting, the best I've ever seen. And I don't want to say that they've got nothing else to teach, because they absolutely do, especially in a country that's developing like that. But if those students at the age of 15, 16 can have amazing handwriting skills, and so many of our students with non-special needs don't have those skills, there's something wrong in the system. Yeah, I think more time needs to be given to kids to learn how to write properly, because that skill is something that remains with them for life. And I know you will always have people say, well, technology is taken over, the future isn't going to be writing. If you don't use those fine motor skills to learn how to write, how do you expect somebody to make a cake and break eggs without crashing all of the shell in there? I don't know.
I think it's difficult in languages as well, because in the writing exam in languages, if you were to type that on a laptop, would you have to type that in German? I haven't even thought about that as an access arrangement.
It's a bit of a difficult one, because if you type it on Word, you can then change the language, highlight it, and it'll find all of the errors, and then all you've got to do is right click fix, and then you've got a very good text to have marked. And then the other side of it is, you give someone a writing slope or a pen that's more adapted to their hand, and then the student doesn't want to use it because they are the only one using it.
Stigma is a huge issue across any technology you might want to provide in the classroom. If that student is the only person who's using that piece of assistive or adaptive tech, even if it is just a pen that's been adapted, it becomes a huge difficulty to support that learner, which is why I think the use of a range of tools has got to be a whole school strategy, not just something that individual teachers are trying very hard to support children with. It's got to be embedded from a higher level right from the outset.
So if there was this class where I thought so-and-so would really benefit from this, I made a point of them having seen me use it before I gave it to them. And I was to say, I'm going to go and teach them. Can you use this? Tell me what you think. I'm going to come back and take it from you in 10 minutes. Just to, rather than it being such an intense interaction, I made it sort of like, well, I need this in the minimum, you need it now, we'll do a swap in a little bit. And that was a way of winning over some students who were a little bit reluctant to the support. Also, when students did any typing of any kind on the computer, I withdrew that from more able students and had them use their computer less. But because we'd started all together using the computer, it wasn't such a conflict when it came to me saying, oh, okay, well, I think you can actually write. Whereas I think it's more useful for you to use this because you can use the online dictionary for some support. Play with how you can exploit the different tools in a very low, impactful way.
I think that's really interesting, actually, starting off everybody using that tool that is going to support that learner, and then actually figuring out who has got a faster writing speed, who would benefit from it, and actually saying, okay, we're going to splinter off. We're going to get that group to use this tool, this group to use this tool, and you're starting off from that positive, inclusive environment, and you as a teacher leading that. You were a bit of a maverick when you then went into your second school, where you became head of department, because you were then tasked with having children who were in a resource space, and all of those children had an EHCP, and some of those learners had significant learning needs.
It was a Spanish class that they were timetabled to do. And I remember the deputy had said, before you teach anything, just go and interact in that time. There was 2 people who were completely nonverbal. There was another boy that had a very limited vocabulary. There was one boy that stop talking, a huge spread in ability and communicative abilities. And I remember walking out, seeing the deputy, and I said, well, I'm not teaching them Spanish. And she said, well, what are you going to do then? I said, well, I can't teach them a foreign language.
Just going to stop you there, because this was quite controversial and still is in lots of schools, where somebody in the languages department says, actually, I can't teach them this, or I'm not going to teach them this. And the expectation that as a broad and balanced curriculum, as a languages teacher, you're expected to offer and deliver this content.
Teaching them Spanish was a complete waste of time, ineffective to their communication needs, and posed a danger to the students that were nonverbal, which led to a little bit of a verbal conflict between me and my superior. And they said to me, so what's the alternative? They need to have some form of language teaching. What are you going to do? I said, I'm going to do Makaton. It is a foreign language. It ticks the box for the national curriculum, and it's way more beneficial for them than sitting there learning basic Spanish, which is absolutely irrelevant to their lives and where their lives will go. And the agreement was, we will see how it goes. Little did I know that the students really, really enjoyed it. They asked for more lessons. Downtime, they would want to watch the YouTube videos and practice. It was completely kinesthetic, so it was something very, very different to what they'd done in other subjects. It became something that the school wanted to show off when visitors came, because it was very simple but had a huge benefit for those students. And I enjoyed it. I hadn't done it before. We learnt how to make the signs together. There were some signs that I found difficult to do that they helped me with, and vice versa. And we made it into a game. It was great.
I think doing it as a whole class, doing it with the assistive technology, where you were doing it with iPads and they had headphones on as well. You were doing the things together, a lot of repetition and
the one
rote.
thing that was really good was that very few lessons did they have any chance to go off and do anything independently because of their needs. But with a bit of training, we were able to get them to work together as a class. We're going to learn the signs for this today. And then I'd give everyone a headphone, get their laptops out, and they could practice on their own at their own pace. It was the first time that they'd done any independent work in some of their cases, and that felt quite good to have enabled that to happen.
I wanted to just unpick something that you said, which was, I had a confrontation with my superior, and I immediately went, not superior, just someone who is just in a position where you have to liaise and negotiate and have something agreed. I'm really interested in sort of unpicking this conversation and then how that led to a sea change in the way that the school was approaching the value of what you were doing, shifting from Spanish being the most important thing to actually prioritising the needs of the students is the most important thing. Who was involved in that conversation? How did it take quite a long time for that to crystallise and improve as a situation? Because I imagine that was probably stressful.
The thing that I found stressful about it was that I was expected to do something that didn't sit right with me morally. And I don't really mind who I have a conversation with about that, because it's not coming from a place of I don't want, it's I don't think it's right. Because in that school year, the SENCo was also new. We sort of embarked on this conversation together, and I said to her previously, after observing those students, it's not right. We can't do this. It has no benefit for their long-term education.
As practitioners, we need our allies, don't we, when we're working in these situations, particularly when a top-down approach may just not see what you're seeing. It's like you were saying earlier. If that person hasn't got sight of the child, if they don't understand their needs, there's always going to be an imbalance in what you believe morally, what you believe really practically should be supporting those children, and the pressures from above. So you've got to align your allies and people who've also taught those children and understand their needs in order to make that kind of shift. And that sounds like what you did.
Yeah, and in education, we always hear the phrase having a difficult conversation with someone. I don't really believe that exists. If someone does something wrong, I'd like to think that 99% of the time it's not because they've intended to do something wrong. It's because they've got a stressful job, they're working stupid hours, They don't know what population are going to walk through the door next. There's a lot of administrative work that has to be done as well. So if somebody does mess it up, it's not because it's intentional. So when I came to have that conversation with the people above me, I didn't feel awkward about it. I was able to back up the reasons why. I felt very strongly that that wasn't the right thing to do. I had my ally in the new SENCo, and because of that, we were able to make that change.
There's always tension when you want to change the playbook because people have such entrenched expectations. However, what I really liked about the way that you work this through, Makaton is a language, it's a communication support, that what could be finer for young people who really struggle with their communication, particularly if they're non-verbal, to be able to give them those tools that they can then use in other lessons. So I think you found a genius level solution there.
Yeah, well done, Jack. Just before we move on, I just wanted to talk about your time in the school in Dubai, which is a universal American school, how you're dealing with the workload and wellbeing abroad, because we see on lots of teacher forums, people in this country, in the UK, are particularly saying, actually, the workload is just impacting massively on my wellbeing. Some people are just thinking, do you know what? I'm just going to go and earn some money in another country. Is it as easy as that? And how have you found that journey?
I would say the process of going was quite easy in as far as you just had to fill out a lot of information about yourself, about your work history, and have your references ratify everything. There is an immense amount of jobs out there in the international world that we don't even know about in this country. I can't say I didn't go completely because of the workload, because the workload in this country for teaching is ridiculously high. I remember when I finished my master's degree, my thesis was about attrition rates in teachers within their first 5 years. And that was on the back of, there was only me and one other person who was surviving 5 years on as a teacher. And, if that was in nursing, if that was in the fire service, if that was in the NHS, that would be just an awful national shock and shame. But in teaching, I feel like teachers leave, class sizes get bigger, stresses increase, and little is done to acknowledge the impact as things go on. And so many teachers just think, you know what, I can earn a similar or more salary and go and do something 9 to 5 and have less holidays, but not have to work till 11 o'clock at night. And this is an awful lot of work for what you're earning. Is this really what you want to do? If this is going to be like this forever? And luckily, you collect your resources, you become quite flexible in the classroom as you get more skilled at the job. But it doesn't take away from the exam stress that you have. It doesn't take away from the emotional stress when you've had somebody come to you with something awful. You go home and you think, is that student okay? It's the first person you go and check on the next morning. That's the hard part of the job. And that's not taken away in the international system either. The assumption is, I think, that we go and work in a bunch of schools where the families are largely wealthy. And in a lot of cases, that's the case. But, in the UAE, we talk a lot about wealth neglect and how families are not present because they're working away on business or they throw money at problems. So, it's not like you go to an international school and SEN doesn't exist. My school has an SEN population of 11%. Culturally, is not as accepted in some Arab countries as others. We have a lot of families at school who are somewhat in denial about their child being SEN. So the true figure is maybe a little bit higher than 11%. Ultimately, you as the teacher are only going to be successful with those kids if you're going to do something creative to hook them in and to, show the families that you really care.
Still the same types of children, but just in a little bit of a warmer country. Well, not today, actually. It's really warm in the UK today. That brings us on to our next segment.
Jack, I'm really excited to talk to you about some technology, really, and tech that can support, because I know this is a a passion of yours, something you're really interested in, particularly thinking about ways that teachers can be supported to use their time more effectively. And as we talked earlier about attrition rates for teachers, it's a significant problem. So anywhere we can use AI or assistive tech to improve time management for teachers, to give people back a little bit of time to organise and support them with their workload, that is really helpful. So I was hoping that we could have a chat about perhaps what's helped you the most, or some top tech that you might advise.
As a languages teacher, there's a program that I used in my first school, and I fought for it to be used in every school since. It's called LanguageNote. It's a really good system. And within that, you can select different levels. It makes the learning process much more fun. It's a lot of gamification, but it always has a purpose to it. It's made by people that have worked for AQA, I believe, or it was AQA or EdExcel. So it is very much geared towards GCSE, but it even starts in primary school now. So that has been a really good tool for me in the languages classroom. We can thank COVID for a lot of our technology advances over the course of the last few years. And it's really made the classroom a much more interactive place. The downside to it is that students are getting more face time with technology, when arguably this generation need significantly less. But what it's done is it's made the teachers able to teach things that are way more diverse in how they're delivered. You know, I've seen people using QR codes for students to select their learning based on how they feel about the given topic.
Okay, well, seeing as the head teachers throwing cannonballs into the staff room, I think it'd be an idea if we perhaps just clarify the shore leave supplies for our SENCos on board. Tell us about your website. Where can people look at that and explore that resource?
Okay, so the website is called Teach Diff AI. You can create lessons that are, I would say, fully inclusive. We talk a lot about the lower ability kids, but we also have students who are very high ability who are very often bored in lessons because they don't have things to really push them on to the next level. We talk about gifted and talented students a lot in the American curriculum, less so in the UK curriculum, but this website also considers them and their needs. Just because someone is really clever and really bright doesn't mean that they don't have other needs. And you know, I've done an awful lot of research on this, and we need to consider them more in the classroom as well. You can use this to help you with your creativity. There's generators on there for advice if you don't know how to deal with a particular disability. It's also very, very much research informed. I don't like it when we talk in education about things that aren't informed by research. There's the 8 most common disabilities that you find in the classroom with strategies, some statistics about that disability, a little bit of a wider context about what that disability is. There is an explanation there about how differentiation and adaptive teaching are different, but both have a point and a purpose in the classroom, and it gives you examples of that. People can share their prompts to a community within the website. My ideal dream is for one day to log on and there'll be 10,000 prompts that people have shared. And then I can use AI to create the perfect inclusive prompt curriculum. Because I think we're going to move away from having things being so prescriptive. You know, if I think now to the UAE, they've just released something to say that in the future, by 2030, every student is going to have an equivalent to an IEP, regardless of whether they are SEN or not. That's going to be met with a bit of resistance, I think, because that's going to be an awful lot of work, but there's nothing to say that AI can't support with that. So I think that my website will offer people with ideas for how they can better support people in the classroom, resources that they can literally use there and then, and it can increase people's general knowledge about how to include inclusive practices in the classroom.
Jack, can you just tell us the name of that one more time, please?
Yeah, the website is called Teach Diff AI. Once I've got in there and I've started doing things, it's really taken me to a lot of different places. It's made me think about teaching from the perspective as the parent, the teacher, the student, the teacher and assistant, and school leadership, because if all 5 of those people are involved in the process, all 5 need to be content with what is being produced. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jack. Chief WarpTech Clouter will link that website in the chat and onto our description on Spotify for this podcast. Thank you very much for coming into our quarters. I can see in the distance that your jolly boat has arrived to take you back to shore. Thank you for joining us, Jack.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
A pleasure.
Okay. So this is our section, our bonus boys for today. What were your key takeaways from our guest, Chief WarpTech?
Okay, so wasn't he a lovely guest and so interesting, so much that he said, so many takeaways. Play with how you use the tools to support the learners. So this feeds into something I've thought for a very long time, which is teachers need to take responsibility for modelling tech tools. Normal way of teaching trumps everything. And how you do that it just lays the foundations. So one of the things that Jack said was, I would hand this to a student and say, I'm going to take this back in 10 minutes, but can you just check this out for me? Because I'd just like to know what you think of it. And then I'm just taking this back now. Just how did that go? Was that interesting? Was it useful? It's such a gentle way of supporting a learner into a new piece of tech so that it doesn't feel that they're significantly different to somebody else. It reduces the stigma, and it uses that, or gives you the potential to use the wonderful terminology, which is I wonder if, which is so gentle and so easy for students to manage. I wonder if you might want to just have a go with this for me for 10 minutes. Doesn't put any pressure on, because they can always say, no, I don't think I will, thank you very much. Or they could just go, oh, you've chosen me to do something. That's really cool. So I really like those takeaways about playing with the tools, using them, modelling them in front of students, so important, making that normal way of teaching. And then he had that brilliant case study, which was to do with the familiarity issue around, okay, well, we've had COVID, now we've experienced using these tools, so we can introduce these tools into the classroom. We can do it confidently. Students do have the experience. So I thought that was really interesting. And I do have one more, which was I really liked the way he counted off his stakeholders on his hand. Really like that, so that you're assured that you've gone through the process of telling the people that you need to about what your intentions are and how you're going to move forward with students. So those were my wonderful takeaways from Jack today.
This is my Jerry Springer moment, my final reflection, and I think we're going to carry on with popping my message in a bottle, sending that away to see, so whoever finds that message in a bottle can read it and feel enthused or empowered. It's when you've got an idea, or when you feel that something is morally right for the child in front of you, that you go and have a conversation. And you do have to have an air of confidence, and Jack does have an air of confidence. Don't think of it as a difficult conversation. Don't put that level of anxiety in your mind that actually I've got to go and have this difficult conversation. No conversation is a difficult conversation if you're doing what's right for the child. And I think that's really sort of inspired me today. Do what's morally right and go with your gut, I think, and have that conversation. Find your allies. He found his ally in the SENCo. We talk about you are not an island. Find your crewmates, find your shipmates, find your allies, and then go and have that positive conversation about making a change in your school. So that's a long-winded message in a bottle for me today. So yeah, we just want to finish by saying, remember, you are not an island. Build your crew, share the load, and keep your compass aligned with your values. Hang on a minute. Why are we slowing down? There's plenty of wind, Chief Tech.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Well, I think if I perhaps jettison the CPD folder from 2012, just hold on a second and yeah, there we go. Get rid of that. We'll go a bit faster. So hang on to your hat, and we're into the shanty. Warp speed. Let's get out of here. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode, and we'll see you next time.
The new SENCo, it's you we are needing. Our children are challenging, our parents are pleading. Can you write that report? My time's short, so I'm hearing, but I trust you. You're in control. vision needs mapping and TAs deploying the policy schedule. It's frankly annoying. We need to upskill and refill our crew. Ah, but I trust you, my SENCo. You'll know what to do. Take out the compass and give me a bearing. My marbles are lost and my patience is wearing. Can I go on with support? You'll be steering. Oh, I trust you. You're in control. Ahoy! Navigate well. Model best practice. Ship in support. Sustain and explain. Stick to the possible. Unload the doubtful. Trust me. I'm in control. Stick to the possible. Unload the doubtful. Trust me. I'm in control.